Even the new Pokemon Scarlet and Violet trailer is reminding us of our impending doom. So what Pokemon is next to talk about in the decks? Chansey and Blissey. So we have one of the most OP, problematic, broken, busted, cracked, collapsed Pokemon in history of competitive Pokemon, and now it can become any type. We can't even begin to understand how much trouble we are in. And that expands the discussion to something else entirely. Because when looking at it, what happens when you take one of the most broken normal type Pokemon and give it access to anything? Well, what does that mean for Tera in general? What's the best offensive type going to be? What's the best defensive type going to be? And let me tell you, I am down the rabbit hole. Because what if we made Chansey a Steel-type Pokemon to give it tons of resistances? Well, then it has a lot of weaknesses. And that's kind of the problem with the Pokemon. You eat a physical hit and you are not having a good time. So what if we just move it to something like Electric, that has good amount of resistances, only one weakness on the ground, and the neutral hit's still not great if you're going to be eating like a powerful physical neutral hit. But then you think about it, normal is just a good defensive type. It doesn't have those resistances, so you don't have like hard switches and stuff. But Ghost Immunity, one weakness, just like Electric. What else do we have? Because what if we play into that weakness? You know, we're about to eat a fighting type move, that close combat is going to KO us, boom, we're a flying type. Well, now we just added more weaknesses. We don't want to eat the Ice Punch, Thunder Punch, Rock Slide. Actually, those are low base power. Maybe we do want to eat those. Unfortunately, not a crazy amount of resistances. Ground Immunity. Yep, this is what I mean. Like, I went down the rabbit hole. What is the best defensive type for Terastal outside of Chansey, or for any Pokemon? Well, let's actually see how bad it is for Chansey to eat a neutral physical hit. So, Life Orb, Garchomp, Jolly Nature needs that speed, 130 attack on the higher end, but not like the most oppressive Pokemon we can think about for physical attacks, but another common Pokemon. So, Earthquake coming in to a full defensive Blissey, 40%. Not a 2-hit KO. That is important. Also, other weird things to note about, because Pokemon is weird in the damage calculations and the numbers. So, Stab Earthquake, same damage, effectively, as a super effective Rock Slide. So, let's say we make our Chansey a flying type. Well, now we have to worry about the Rock Slide, which was the same as worrying about the Earthquake, but now we get, like, some weirdness going on. So, we become flying, we're eating some kind of, like, fighting hit from a Pokemon, and something common like the Garchomp, or just common like Earthquake, we get a free turn of immunity, and then the super effective return hit isn't that insane. Now, Stone Edge, so if this was a Tyranitar, yeah, we don't want to be going flying into Tyranitar, because then we get, like, this power, but also stab, and now it's super scary. But, I mean, like, that's actually not the worst, since it's not giving us for having a 5 defense. We might have something to work with here. Let's keep going deeper. So if we're worried about the fighting type hit on a normal type Pokemon, or a Chansey, or a Blissey in this case, what if we just go for something else? So Psychic, okay, that's a terrible defensive type. Fairy. Is Fairy what we're looking for? We pick up an extra weakness, but Poison Steel, workable. Immunity to Dragon, that's a plus. Bug Dark resistances aren't great, but you know what would be crazy right now? If Chansey and Blissey ended up becoming a Fairy type when Fairy type was introduced. So now we're actually talking about like Clefable, which is already a destructive competitive Pokemon, but with Chansey or Blissey's stats. And that kind of goes into another weird thing, because Calm Mind Blissey, very oppressive, very strong, but when it comes to the offensive options, like, what are you going to do? I mean, like, Hyper Voice for the stab, but then a Ghost-type Pokemon ruins your day and it gets resisted by a lot. You have the Ice Beam into a Serene Grace, and, like, you don't have, like, the damage. So even if you're full stacking or getting tons of Calm Minds, your damage isn't there. But then I realized, like, wait, it's got the Dazzling Gleams. So if we go into a Fairy Tera type, that's going to be backed up by our moveset with something like the Dazzling Gleam. It gets Stab, it's not immune, going to synergize into Calm Mind. So if we were to just go into a typing that gives us good offensive and defensive pressure, we're just stronger on already one of the most threatening Pokemon in the game. Wait a second, Tera Blast. So we aren't even restricted by our moveset on not only Blissey, on not only Chansey, but every Pokemon. And we already know about this, but again, going down the deep dive of like optimal typing chains and things you want to do, swapping archetypes, unlocking movesets that were never available on this type of Pokemon before, it makes things super duper wild. But then it makes me think like, okay, is that what we want to do? Do we want to go for the pseudo offensive setup Chansey, but turn it into a fairy type? Now, unfortunately, because I'm using like hidden power to try to convey this type thing, which isn't in any simulator builder thing, we actually don't have fairy type hidden power in general. So let's just pretend we're talking about fairy Chansey in this case, and then that means like, yeah, we switch it up. So we go, also we don't have hidden power fairy, but I mean we have Tera Blast. So we have the Tera Blast here. Now we don't know what Tera Blast base power is going to be. Do we just give a Thunderbolt to every typing? You know, 90 base power, is it going to be 80 to kind of back off and keep it balanced? When you look at some of the power of Dynamax moves, where it's like, yeah, you're just going to get a 110, 120 base power, 130 base power move for free when you pop the gimmick, maybe Tera Blast is going to be strong on that 90, maybe even 95 to give you a little bit extra if you're leaning into double typing or something. So this now becomes outrageous on fairy typing. Like, we're just better in every way. Now, technically, a lot of other Pokemon are just better from Tera shenanigans, but it also kind of means, like, what do we do for different Chansey movesets? This one, yeah, okay, so we do the cute thing. We immune an Earthquake, or we just kind of absorb a fighting type move that would otherwise destroy us. Another thing to maybe kind of consider is how the typings are going to interact, because if we do become a flying type, electric, ice, more common, Thunderbolt, Ice Beam, we don't care about eating a super effective one of those as a special defense Pokemon. But then, like, if a Pokemon goes Tera, gets access to a physical iced Tera Blast, now we're in trouble. So the powers and things, we're going to have to change our entire mentality, our entire thinking about this. But how does this work for just, like, you run it out there Chansey? You know, tank Chansey, defensive investment, eat some hits, wear them down, out-sustain forever, throw status everywhere. And then, really, how this Chansey is shaped is a lot of different things. We have Teleport. That way, you eat the hit, you get a free switch, and then you're just up. And if they try to use a special attack, Chansey comes back in, and you're just winning. Teleport Scarlet is one of the most frustrating things you can do to an opponent. Also, the aromatherapy. Problem. Ghost just going to wall you out. And if there's movesets like this, I also talked about in the last video, that if you just go mono body press, that you set up like a lot of sustain, you set up a lot of stats, iron defense, amnesia, curse amnesia, body press, very, very powerful. But with your sustain move, you are locked into mono fighting. So do random Pokemon just want to have a ghost Tera type? Does Chansey want to have the random ghost Tera type? Wait a second, that also immunes the fighting. And then you pick up some nasty super effectives you don't want. Dark Physical, the Crunch, now we're scared, now we're taking a lot of damage, but again, against like other things where their threat is only going to be like a fighting or a normal type, you're gaining something that could really wreck an opponent, and then you have to think about your team compositions and building outside of that. Because now, what does Scarm Bliss look like where either the Scarm can be any type, or the Bliss can be any type, and then that opens up more defensive options, where you have the best special defense tank in the game, and you turn it into any type, which means now other physical Pokemon that weren't really as viable, like pure physical defensive tanks that weren't as viable, you can now switch into them because it's not a liability for your Blissey as much, or not a liability of that Pokemon to be with your normal type Blissey. I can't even begin to crack the surface in this video that is dedicated to Chansey and Blissey. That is how insane that's going to be. Now that also means we would need to know the full dex and the other implications outside of that, but even then, like, now we have to warp everything we know about tank combos and stuff like that, and then how much of a liability are you making yourself? Because then maybe the offensive meta now becomes that they bring in an overwhelmingly powerful and fast physical sweeper to Tera into one of their existing types to just double down into the damage and mow through any Blissey, because even if you change Chansey or Blissey's type, it's going to be weak physically, and then maybe even a physical tank can't handle or can't buff it out into something that's going to be double terraing. So that's where it gets scary. And then still also have like a lot of weird utility and shenanigan options on the Chansey. If you're not running Ice Beam, Natural Cure is the play. Flamethrower, I don't know if like Ferrothorn's gonna stay Grass, Steel, and 4 times Weakness is gonna be out there as much. I've always liked the Ice Beam. You still hit Ferrothorn neutral. That goes into Serene Grace, chance to freeze Seismic Tosses, freeze switches, anti-synergy on Thunder Wave, but again, full paralysis, always nice. This will still hit like Ghost type Pokemon and not have the immunities, so at least you're able to chip and get away with something. I don't think this is the best moveset though for the Chansey, because throughout Pokemon Sword and Shield, Calm Mind Defense Curl, that was the play. If you get a Defense Curl into their special attacker, now their physical attacker isn't threatening you. If you're stacking Calm Minds, you eventually become a damage threat. And now with the Tera shenanigans, you go into any Tera Blast that you want of any typing and whatever, and potentially mitigating whatever weaknesses. So I think the Fairy is actually going to be very powerful on this. Like, okay, Fairy Chansey to survive the physical hit, upside of Immuning Outrage, which is something you also don't want to eat. You pick up some of the weaknesses. Where do those weaknesses put us? Yeah, Iron Head hurts, Poison Jab hurts, Steel Terra, Poison Terra, but it's not like you're finding a higher base power move that's going to be threatening on that physical side. Yay! More Bulbapedia type pages down this rabbit hole just to make sure I'm covering my bases. But when you think about it, Gunk Shot, 80% accuracy. So if it's a 2-hit KO and they miss one of them, you're gonna be in a pretty good position. But yeah, like Gunk Shot's the worst you're seeing, and then it's Poison Jab, 80 base power, or Terra Blast, potential 90 base power. Steel Beam, that's gonna be special. Steel Roller, never really got usage. Also, you're not going to be playing on terrain. There's even less terrain out there because of Dynamax shenanigans going away. Iron Tail, no one runs that, so the worst you're seeing is a Meteor Mash. Okay, Metagross already wrecks you anyway, so you want to play around that one to begin with. So yeah, things don't get worse for you as a Fairy-type Chansey. It might make it to where you don't also want to stack this with the Clefable and it changes your team compositions, but it might even be easier to keep a Fairy-type Chansey safe than a Normal-type Chansey safe or a Flying-type Chansey safe. That means you probably don't need the Serene Grace. You definitely don't want to go Ice under any circumstance. So now you just hit everything better for more damage while converting into a stab while being extra unkillable. The only thing that threatens you now is a crit physical hit. Preferably super effective. So yeah, like, let's say you get in on the Chansey against a special attacker. Defense Curl, they switch. Now they bring in something that's trying to hit you with a physical hit, and then you go, maybe it's just a Garchomp. Garchomp wants to come in, outrage you. Now you Terra type into Fairy. Well, that's just straight immune. Defense Curl 2. At that point, this doesn't matter. Now you're just tanking everything because we saw the damage numbers, and the damage numbers fall off pretty quick. Even going into the Earthquake, where it's like, Earthquake, kind of sketchy, but then +1, well, now you're just like Giga out healing it, and even into the Blissey. So Blissey is going to be more frail than Chansey, but it preserves an item because it's not having Eviolite shenanigans. So yeah, even a full defensive Blissey, Earthquake's two-shotting you. Yikes, you don't want that. Wait, eat an Earthquake, Defense Curl. Now you can't die, unless it's crit. But that's just RNG, and we don't talk about that. So now you're just setting up against Garchomp. And then the leftovers is really nice to have on the Blissey, because if Chansey gets burned, if Chansey gets like not toxic poison, just regular poison off of something like a Poison Jab, it's not liking that. So you're going to be falling behind. But with Blissey, at least you're offsetting and negating a lot of that on leftovers. Just like, oh, you take burn damage leftovers, Leech Seed leftovers, whatever. So you're not as susceptible to just kind of getting, whittled away on the Blissey. So there's pros and cons. Less tanky, more longevity, less worry about eating status. And if you're committing to defense curls, you don't want to be switching out every time you eat a status move for that natural cure. So yeah, the game gets complicated. But then like, okay, now you're just +1 on that defense against Garchomp. And then you're +2. And then you're +3. And then you're +4. And now nothing kills you. And then you get some Calm Minds, and now you're hitting, Dazzling Gleam, Dazzling Gleam, Terra Blast, whatever, even uninvested. And that's kind of like another weird thing, to where we're talking about this moveset on Chansey, 35 special attack, still gonna kind of suck. 75 special attack on the Blissey that can now actively move into other types. It's an offensive threat where one did not exist. It's a stronger hitting Chansey that now has access to the stab and potential type shenanigans. Oh god. That's what I mean, the rabbit hole is not a good thing. It just reminds you that it's GG. And then yeah, so we make Blissey a fairy type. We go +3 and we're KOing Garchomp. We're going +2 and we're KOing Garchomp. You gotta remember, Garchomp's got the life orb, so defense curl, or defense curl, heal, defense curl, calm mind, heal, calm mind, dazzling gleam. Like, it's gonna die to burn. Like, at that point, you might only need a +1 depending on how much you're setting up. Also, if the opponent is choiced, they're easier to bait and trap into that. It also means they're gonna be much weaker in the long run if you can just kind of resist into them in some kind of way. So yeah, and then I'm kind of playing around with different EVs because the numbers in this game get so weird because of diminishing returns. When you have the highest base in the game, that doesn't do anything. So the hit points, 252 hit points is giving you 10% durability against physical hits because you're already going max into defense. Now on something so low, that could definitely matter. And putting extra points into special defense also doesn't really matter since, yeah, the durability is going to be 6% on that, so probably just better off going all in on the hit points in all cases. I guess we need to think like worst case where Porygon is coming in, it's going like double normal, but even then it has to do something. Like something has to work out for the Oh wait, that's Porygon, not Porygon Z. Okay, let's talk about Porygon Z. So let's say Porygon Z comes in, adaptability, Choice Scarf just to be safe on outspeeding everything, and then it's going normal Tera on top of it. Tera Blast is actually a 90 base power move. It doesn't matter. Even if it's choice specs, it doesn't matter. So it's not like, well, I need the 200 EVs to survive a Porygon Z. No, you don't. And then you just call mind and then you heal, and we've already been through that math. So even the worst case special case just means go 252, 252, like pretty much same thing on the Blissey as well. And well, at least for the Chansey, because Blissey, it's not getting like the Eviolite shenanigans, you know, it's not getting 50% more on that special defense into hit point interaction. So I guess we need to see Poryzon. Yeah, that's definitely how you spell. So go Porygon Z, same things. Let's move the tri-attack down and also give it that critting, and then we bring this down to level 50. Is this the same Pokemon? Yeah, so again, like when the numbers start scaling so high, so we go back to this, where it's like, yeah, 43, 45. So even without the Eviolite, special doesn't matter because that's just how the damage calculation breaks down when you have like the fattest special defense on the fattest health Pokemon. 52, 200 or whatever. It's not worth it. Yeah, just always go 2v2 hit points, 2v2 defense on every Chansey, Blissey, regardless. That way you can get the Calm Mind, still be safe. Get the Defense Curl, still be safe. No Pokemon threatens you unless it's hitting you super. Flash Cannon at that point, not going to be as crazy as like... A Stab Flash Cannon doesn't even match adaptability, Porygon doubling down into Tera. I think this was a mistake from Game Freak. Chansey and Blissey are immortal. Really, if you don't have Taunt, if you don't have Haze, and you don't have some kind of like hard switch out move like Roar Whirlwind, like you can't do anything about it. But even then, like, Tera Blast is going to mean it has some kind of threat. Like, it's going to do something. And it's still, like, safe to switch out, safe to synergize into the rest of your team with. How can you get rid of it? And if you're not, like, doing Serene Grace Ice Beam shenanigans, you can't just Toxic it. The game states get very, very bad. You have to, like, you just have to outset it up. You have to bring in a Pokemon that has, like, fighting and ground and ice. So, like, Ice Punch, Earthquake, Close Combat. I don't know. Because maybe there is going to be some mad lads that are like, yo, flying. Just in case. Because, like, yeah, if it goes Fairy, okay, cool. That +2 Earthquake, it's still not going to like that. That +4 Earthquake, doesn't matter how many defense curls you have. Chansey's still going to be in a bad spot against a 130 base power stab. Not even talking about Garchomp. Even though Sword Stance Garchomp kind of matters, but then you just go Fairy and you hit it with the Tera Blast super effective, or you just switch out into a different Pokemon and ruin Garchomp's day. Priority might matter. Like, the game's rock, paper, scissors now makes absolutely no sense. Do you have to bring back Toxic? But like I said, with the Poison Cure being, like, extra common, it doesn't matter. But Steel-type Chansey, not a bad idea, especially with special Tera Blast Steel move that's like a Flash Cannon stab on a Blissey. At +1 Calm Mind, that's dangerous to a lot of Pokemon. And even though it seems like Game Freak tried to make some kind of move to where it's like, ew, every Pokemon just randomly becoming a Toxic Staller is bad, well, the downside to that is now a lot of Pokemon don't have to worry about Toxic Stalling, that were only stoppable through Toxic Stalling. So do more Pokemon get it back in? Does it make its way back into TM? Do some other Pokemon come into play? Like Weezing, I think soft leaked, maybe even hard leaked to be in the game, to where it's like, oh, Weezing gets a Toxic and then can Tera into Electric with Levitate. A no weakness Weezing. That can Toxic or Will-O-Wisp you and then do other filthy, filthy things. That might be also equally strong, or is it just you always want to have the Chansey to Terrastalize or the Chansey counter to Terrastalize? This was a long video on just one Pokemon, and we didn't even scratch the surface. I love how big my brain feels and how cool competitive is going to be. There's also the dark side, man. And that dark side is not looking good. Hope you guys enjoy the... But then, okay. Never mind. But then you bring in Clefable. However, Clefable isn't in. Like, if Clefable's not in, that's about as devastating as it gets. Because you need the Unaware. You need Clefable to then become a Steel Terrastal. And then you need to use that Steel Terrastal to counter the Fairy Blissey on your Calm Minds. Maybe. Game's ugly.